Welcome everyone to NFG's next session in our 40 Years Strong virtual convening series. This is our What's Land Got to Do With It session. I'm Courtney Benayed, she, her pronouns, and I'm NFG's Director of Membership and Communications. I just wanted to let you all know that we have Zoom captioning available today that you can turn on in your toolbar. Please feel free to turn your camera on if you'd like for us to see your faces, and you can also rename yourself by adding your pronouns in your organization. And now I'm going to pass it off to our board member, Mark.
Hello, I'm Mark Paley, and I'm the Director of Administration and Finance at the Hyams Foundation in Boston. And I'm also honored to be a board member of NFG. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the NFG 2020 Virtual Convening Series event, What's Land Got to Do With It? The Role Land Plays in Our Social Movement, Past, Present, and Future. This event is one of a series for the 40th Anniversary National Convening. After graduating college in California many years ago, I wanted more practical training and learn about another culture in the United States. A professor said I should do an internship at Penn Center in Beaufort, South Carolina. So I did, and I had no idea what I was getting into. And it was one of the most important decisions and experiences of my life. I quickly learned that land in the Sea Islands off the coast of South Carolina and Georgia is an essential part of the Gullah culture. Family connections to the land were handed down from generation to generation. And the land was valuable to private developers who easily and notoriously took land from local families because of something called heirs property. Not having transferred ownership through legal or white supremacist ways made the Gullah families vulnerable to private developers to have their land taken. Sometimes developers identified faraway family members with little or no connection to the land to entice them with money to control a fraction of the land. Then developers could force a sale. Then they could develop islands like Hilton Head. My mentor, who was raised on Hilton Head before the bridge, had the freedom to explore land where he knew and was known by many family and friends who looked out for one another. One of my first experiences was when he showed me his family cemetery. He had to request permission to be led into the gated community, and we drove to a small plot of graves marked by gravestones surrounded by luxury vacation homes. My work there led me to appreciate the Gullah community and their devotion to family and culture, and to learn that they were under attack by developers creating vacation destinations for people who have no idea or respect for families who lived there before. Shortly, we're going to hear from leaders who work to build infrastructure, allowing folks to invest in their own communities to fight for climate justice, sovereignty, and land justice. I now want to introduce you to NFG staff member Niall Malloy, who will talk about democratizing development program.
Hello, everyone. My name is Niall Malloy. I'm the director of the Democratized Development Program, and the Democratized Development Program thrives to be a political home for bringing together place-based and national funders to provide learning, deep analysis, and mutual support. We try to create a space where folk can thrive together and be solid in solidarity on the work and the solutions that's happening on the ground. I'm personally excited about today's conversations on the intersection of land, food, housing, power, and ownership, and how land is intimately linked to our liberation and freedom from the shackles of an extractive and exploitive and capitalistic economy. I'm glad that we have phenomenal individuals who are part of a powerful tapestry of leaders that are building movements for land and housing. So I'm gonna actually wanted to just say that I'm just really in deep appreciation for the leadership that's on this call, and really looking forward to a profound conversation. And we just hope that whatever our funders are hearing in the discussion, you want to continue to be a part of the work of NFG. So I'm gonna pass it on to Allison and Kelly from Certain Foundation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Terry, and I am a senior program officer at the Certain Foundation in the Sustainable Environments team. And it was my great honor and pleasure to join you and be in community with you all today. I want to really thank NFG for including this conversation in its 40th anniversary national convening. given the moment that we're facing, I couldn't think of anything better that we could be doing with our time, our power, and our privilege as philanthropy right now. So it is my esteemed pleasure to just introduce our panelists. Then I'm going to review our agenda and give a little bit more context about the moment that we're in right now and all that we're sitting with. So we will be joined today by Dara Cooper, the Executive Director of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, Dawn Phillips, the Executive Director of the Executive Director of Right to the City Alliance. And we are so saddened that Rowan White, who is the Program Director of the Native American Food Sovereignty Alliance, will be unable to join us today, but unfortunately, she is dealing with a COVID-19 crisis in her community, which we understand is so relevant to what we're all facing right now in this moment. But we will be leaning on Dara and Dawn to bring her voice into this session, as we understand there is no conversation about land if we're not centering the experience and the expertise of the Indigenous community. So that is our goal today. So if we could have the agenda slide up for now, just briefly, if that is the next slide that we're, there we go, wonderful. So just to walk us through a little bit today, we are gonna have a presentation and a conversation from each of our panelists. And it is going to be interactive. So there are gonna be questions between panelists. There are gonna be questions from panelists to the audience back. Then we're gonna do a dance break. We're gonna have some time for Q&A, and then we're gonna have a closing. We really look forward to the next 90 minutes with each other. I'm just gonna take a little bit of time to run through what I see is the moment that we're in right now. And before I do that, I just want to encourage folks to turn your cameras on. We won't bite, we promise. And we would love to bring your physical faces into this community that we're building together today. And we appreciate that. It is fitting to say that our world is on fire. The need to continue to bring the experience of voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, our BIPOC communities, most directly impacted by the dual pandemics of COVID-19 and systemic racism, to the center of our work remains paramount. In September and October, the nightmarish events of 2020 have continued to unfold, now even into November, and escalating. We witnessed the devastation of a miscarriage of justice in the Breonna Taylor case, and another innocent Black man by the name of Jonathan Prince killed at the hands of police. Flames have engulfed California and the Pacific Northwest, and hurricanes continue to barrel down on the Gulf South. The country is experiencing an uptick of COVID-19 cases, including in the nation's capital, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a rushed Supreme Court nomination and confirmation process, a dangerous increase in white supremacist militia, and continued threats to the very fundamental elements of our democracy, fair elections, and a commitment to the peaceful transition of power. All of this as millions of people are left without support from the federal government as Congress fails to pass another much needed relief package. We still can't breathe. We are still angry. We are still reeling. We are all still grieving. We acknowledge this pain so that we can move beyond it without disregarding it. And so with that acknowledgement, in being in community with you all, it is my honor and pleasure to pass this on to my colleague and partner in crime, in the best sense of the word, Allison. Thank you.
The good trouble. Thanks, Kelly. Hey, y'all. It's so nice to see your beautiful faces and hopefully hear your voices at some point. So I'm Kelly's teammate. For those of you whom I don't know, I'm Allison Corwin at the Cerna Foundation, she, her, currently in Brooklyn. And I'm also honored to be on the NFG board. So I love NFG. Kelly and I and our partners have been dreaming about this conversation for a super long time. So I woke up feeling really excited that the day was finally here. So really, thanks for grounding us in that, Kelly. I think, you know, part of what we want to put forward is just to create a space for this conversation today, because we feel like the least we can do is try our best to match the resiliency and the determinateness and the unwillingness of our partners like Dawn and Dara, who are here today, to give up. And so we wanted to create this space to try to match that energy and do our work with love and joy, and to reflect what it is you are gonna bestow upon us today and be in dialogue with each other. So before we really jump into kind of the juice of the conversation, we actually want to know who else is in the room. So we're going to do a quick poll just to know who all is with us. So if we could bring up that first poll question, we'll give y'all just a minute or so to respond. So this is, you know, who are we? Are you an organizer? Are you a funder? Are you coming from the public sector, the private sector, or other? None of those things is you. You can put whatever describes you best and how you're coming into the space in the chat box. Yes, and multiple identities, consulting practice and organizer. I love it. Yes, bring it all in. Love it. Funder, organizer. Yes. Okay, let's go ahead and close that out and see who we have in the room. Okay, y'all, overwhelmingly, no surprise, right? Like almost 3/4 of us are funders. We have 10% organizers, no one from the public sector in the house today or private sector. That's interesting. 15% other. So love that. Keep chiming in on the chat box. Let us know who else is in the space, but just good to know for those who, you know, who are joining us, but maybe you're not speaking, you know, use our voice in other ways. So now we know who's in the room. Thanks for participating. I think we also, so Kelly and I have another invitation to kick us off because, you know, I think as Kelly and I have made our way into philanthropy, one thing we've definitely learned is that it's a white dominant culture that's very stripped of, you know, a lot of fun, to say the least, personality, culture, joy. So we're always trying to figure out ways to do that. But we have an invitation for everybody just to try to show up as our full selves. We believe in and of itself is an anti-racist practice. Like that's an act of resistance in philanthropy alone. So, and not doing it, we know is reinforcing a white dominant culture. So as best you can, we're asking folks, I know there's so much going on, Kelly, you just, you know, the grounding you gave was beautiful, but for however best you can, be present, bring yourself into the space. And we invite you to bring your whole self. It's cool just to be yourself in this space. We don't need to be professional, whatever that means. We don't need to be like our best funder selves, whatever that is. Just bring your whole self. And so we're inviting you to sort of like take off your title, your job title. We're inviting you to take off your position. And we're inviting you to try on your full humanity, your history, your instincts as we move through this conversation about land. And so to get into that space and kind of try that on, we're going to ask folks if you have a pen and paper close by, or you prefer to type out a note. This is just for yourself to have in front of you as we move through this conversation. We just wanted to give a few moments for you to sort of like meditate and think for yourself about what land means to you. So what does land mean to you? What's your relationship to land? And let's just take 30 seconds of silence just to write that down for ourselves or hold that thought and keep it close by. All right, y'all. Continue to meditate and muse on that, I think, as we move forward. But I'm going to kick it back to Kelly, because Kelly has some more to share.
Thanks, Allison. So if we could advance the next slide, that should be a really nice, cool picture. You know, Allison and I, we, just to carry on the thread of just wanting everyone to bring your full selves to this space, really believe in the power of story, and also because our frontline leaders also tell us that this is, how we bring our full selves into the work that we do. And we're sharing this because we think so many of us, so many funders are working to shift the way philanthropy works. And that's why you're here, and how we hold relationships with frontline grassroots leaders, and how we understand our role in the movement and the work. So, as Allison said, we just wanted to provide an opportunity to connect the often bifurcated and separated conversation about the critical and central role of land, and how land is really relevant to all we do within movements and across movements. So what I wanted to do is to one, also just talk about the picture that you're seeing right here. So this picture was taken at the New Communities 50th anniversary celebration in Resora, at Resora, which is in Albany, Georgia. And it was in October 2019, pre-COVID. Who knew there was a world? And why this is critical, because we want to, one, acknowledge that in addition to all the work that you're bringing to this, that we stand on the shoulders of a long and rich land justice movement. In the center, you have Mrs. Sherrod, which is her and her husband, Dr. Sherrod, have connected the dots between the civil rights movement and the land justice movement, and the important role of ownership and community control over land by founding the first land trust in this nation. And it is important that we remember this legacy and its connection to social justice movements, because often in our work, these things are separated. And so, we wanted to provide an opportunity to show you how, for us, this was a manifestation of many years of work behind the scenes of philanthropy to create a strategy that was reflective of the frontline movement. Allison's going to talk a little bit more about what the theory of change is, and to navigate the internal mechanisms of philanthropy to lead us here, which is under this tent, this beautiful tent. We had not only the National Black Food and Justice Alliance community with Dara and Ms. Savvy Horn here from the Land Loss Prevention Projects, but we had a Project South here, and we had Right to the City here in this beautiful tent and community. And so, really, this is what inspired us to create this session and just share a little bit about our journey. And so with that, I want to pass it on to Allison.
That was a hot day in October in Albany, Georgia, but that was amazing. And it feels so long ago, but it was literally just a year ago. So yeah, thanks for that, Kelly. And I think we just wanted to ground it in story, and kind of hanging out under that tent all together, reminded Kelly and I that we knew in our roles that our job as funders is not to set strategy, but is to actually build deep relationship and trust with our movement leaders and our front lines and grassroots organizers and leaders, and literally listen to what it is they are telling us. And that led Kelly and I to be in that tent with a bunch of our partners, and it was beautiful. And so that really, Kelly and I have been rocking together for a little over 5 years, and y'all know different parts of the journey. And we have, I don't know, we've sweat, we've cried, we've laughed, we've done writing, but I think all of it, in all of it, we were traveling, we were listening to folks, we were in churches, we were, again, literally under tents, we were in fields, we were all over the place, really just trying to understand what our role in helping to organize within philanthropy and mobilize the resources as the vision. We're going to hear the visions from Don and Dara and bring Rowan's voice into the space. Y'all are incredible. And we understood our role, was tried to listen, understand, and honor that wisdom and knowledge, and then go back home to our our institutional home at CERTA and figure out what we could do to reorganize our thinking internally to best reflect what y'all have been teaching us. And so that sort of led us to I'll just kind of read out what became the theory of change. The reason why we're sharing this is because we really recognize that a lot of y'all have been doing this work, and we are grateful because we have learned from you, we have organized with you, we continue to strategize and think and do all the things. And we also know there are some folks who are navigating, you may be a funder back home at your institution, and you see a different path, you see a different way you want to organize things, but it's been difficult or hard. And we just want to say there's lots of us. And where there is no way, you find a way. And so we're sort of just sharing this because Kelly and I are just two of many of you who've been trying to shift, what we see as a very white dominant philanthropic culture to something that is really rooted in anti-racist practices that are legitimately in real relationship with our partners. And so that's why we want to share a little bit of our story and how we came to understand land is central to all of our work. In case that is inspiring to you, y'all want to reach out to us. We want to continue to work together. So that all said, where we landed was that we understood that our theory of change, first of all, had to center racial justice first and foremost. We understood that our role was to try to support the increase of voice and power of frontline communities to create more equitable environmental outcomes. So we sit on an environmental team that works intersectionally, right, across racial lines that benefit and uplift all. We can put this in the chat too, because it's a lot to digest. But we understood that the outcomes that we were trying to seek were the outcomes of the frontline leadership, which was to expand the capacity of the environmental and climate leaders of color, particularly our Black leadership, and increase community control over decision-making processes, which is why we understood land to be so central to this conversation. Who gets to decide, who gets to benefit, and what is happening on that land? How do we shift from something that's extractive, both of the land and the people, to something more generative that is determined by the people who live, work, and play on that land. And so we often go about this using sort of, to use a philanthropic word, like interventions, which are about building accountability, building alternatives, and building democracy. And so to that end, we understood we had to get out of our silos because it's bifurcated. We know philanthropy loves to isolate us. Because we're stronger when we're together, and we have these integrated approaches, which are reflective of the communities that we're honored to try to mobilize resources to support, right? So that's how we came up with land use through community power, which Kelly manages, and the climate and environmental justice work that I get to manage. And together we have two sides of the coin, and we get to come together and have conversations like this. So I think, Kelly, I think I want to throw it back to you, unless maybe I should ask that final poll question just before we sort of, okay. So can we bring up the other poll question? This is just so we kind of also know, so who's in the room, and then also where are we in sort of our understanding and learning? So we're curious how familiar land justice work is to you. Is it super familiar? You know a lot about it. Do you know some, but you're still learning? Or is this like a totally brand new area of learning for you? We'll give you just a moment to fill that out. Okay. We go ahead and close the poll and share the results. All right, y'all, overwhelmingly, we know something, but we got more to learn. So that's good news, because we're about to learn a whole bunch and be in dialogue. But it's great to know that we have a mix of folks in the room. I think just as I hand it back over to Kelly to kick off our conversation with our esteemed, brilliant leaders, Don and Dara, I think Kelly and I, want to just message that, we want to not get distracted by the noise. There's a lot of noise right now. And I think our partners like Dawn and Dara have asked us to work through it. So we're here to work through it. And we understand that if we are attuned to and we're listening to the frontline and grassroots leadership and to the right folks, and we get to amplify the right experiences, that can kind of carry us through the more difficult times. And so we hope today is a moment to really deeply listen, reflect, and learn and carry us through some of those difficult times where philanthropy sometimes maybe makes us feel confused at best about what we ought to be doing. So hopefully there's some clarity today. And thanks, y'all. Kelly, I'm kicking it back to you.
Yes, and without further ado, let's get started. So next we're gonna have a deeper dive. We're gonna hear from both Dara and Dawn. Dara is going to also bring Rowan's voice into this space for us. And then we're gonna have some time for the panelists to ask each other questions and then dive into some Q&A. So we don't wanna eat into any more time. So Dara, we're so excited to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What an incredible honor to be here with you all. What a brilliant co-panelists and co-conspirators, and just really excited to be in conversation with you. And Mark, your comments were just really moving for me, because that's actually you lifted up a location that is so critical to this conversation, and also the birthplace of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. And so I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I just thought that was just so spot on, and just really grateful for that. But before I get into the work, I was really inspired by the bringing of our whole selves into this. So you all should know, my name is Dara Cooper. I'm the daughter of troublemakers, good troublemakers. I'm very proud of that. My mother is Iya Ifalola Omobola, who's doing incredible community land and community safety work in Jackson, Mississippi, with the People's Advocacy Institute, and also a priestess in indigenous West African culture. And then I come from another troublemaker, Ernestine Perry, who's an organizer, and who also comes from land in Tennessee. And so you all should know that the work that I do, I'm sure many of us leaders, we can say this, it's deeply personal. My ancestral family on both my maternal and paternal sides were violently removed from our ancestral land. And that's how we ended up in the Midwest. But I came to learn this after years of working, in the food justice movement. And I started wondering, what's my own land story? And then learning academically, learning about what happened, in academic ways. But then it was just a deeper level learning about it personally, right? And to understand history from a personal context. And so that brings me to a mandate that drives my work and many of us in the movement. And I don't know if folks have heard of Mary Hooks from Song, Southerners of New Ground, on New Ground, but she gave a mandate to the movement that came to her. And it makes me think about what drives my work around land that I'll share with you all. And so the mandate, she says, for Black people, particularly in this time, is to avenge the suffering of our ancestors, to earn the respect of future generations, and to be willing to be transformed in service of the work, right? And so I wanted to share that because that grounds kind of how, I approach this work and how many of us are thinking about it, but we're really thinking about, generations ahead, and how we can be transformed in the service of this work, and also honoring our ancestors as well. So the National Black Food and Justice Alliance was founded, as I mentioned, actually at Penn Center, which is, in the Geechee area where Mark mentioned earlier, an incredible place. It was actually the first school for freed enslaved Africans, established in St. Helena Island in 1862. And so we were founded in 2015 because, again, I mentioned I'm a troublemaker. And I've been doing food justice work all around this country. And I knew, and I would go to conferences and would only see, experts who were white. And I was like, I know my people are out there. I know we are doing this work. And so this was many, many years ago, decades ago. And so we, after being involved in the BUGS conferences, Black Farmers for Urban Gardeners and all that, so we got together and we were like, we know that there needs to be some strategic alignment of all of the incredible work being done by Black people all over this country to come together to create a mandate and a mission. And so we were founded, and our goal, our mission, and I think we're really living into it, is to develop Black leadership, to support Black communities, organize for self-determination, and build institutions that work towards Black food sovereignty and liberation and land justice. And so our work is in two particular main areas that all serve the goal of ultimately getting us towards liberation. That's what our work is rooted in. And so one part of it is what we call food sovereignty. And it's, I have a definition I can share with you all later, but it's beyond access. We don't want access to, we want to control the means of, and we want to control the means of a system where we're actually able to build the system that we know our communities deserve, a system that's rooted in dignity and care for Black communities. And so many of our groups we're about 40 members now and growing. And so all over the country. So these are Black farmers, land stewards, organizers doing incredible work. And so in the food sovereignty space, we are working on what's called self-determining food economies, where we're working on supply chain infrastructure and also co-op development. So we have about 30 different partners all over the country doing food co-ops, which is really incredible work. I'm not going to spend too much time there, but I just wanted you all to know that that work is happening. But what I will spend the rest of my time talking about is land, obviously, for this panel. And so before I get into what our work is, what I want to talk about is how we think about land and why it's important, just in case I need to compel some of you folks here on the call to join me in why we understand this is, one of the most urgent places of focus we need to be paying attention to. And so land is intimately tied to our right to space and existence. It's the right to be whole, nourished, and healed, the right to determine the destinies of our communities, the right to be housed, the right to grow for and feed our communities. We're seeing the displacement of Black people all over the country and all over the world. We've seen the decimation of our farming communities reduced by 98% through theft and all sorts of violence. This wasn't by accident, And so we have to understand the intentionality, the ways in which the designs behind how our communities have been dispossessed and violently removed. We have to understand that as we work on the remedies to design a better future forward, right? And so we can't pretend like, none of these things were intentional. And so for my climate family in the audience, for folks to just really understand that land contributes to at least 1/4 of global greenhouse emissions, right? We know that the industrial agricultural system is one of the largest contributors to fossil fuel consumption, right? So for folks who, want to know why land should be important, there cannot be any solution around climate, around environmental justice, if we don't consider land use and a regenerative approach back to the land. And so that is, our focus areas. So not only is our system, our food system particularly is deeply unfair, it's racist, it's sexist. I can totally give you all kinds of, some explanations why, but just trust me for now, because I'm short on time. But it's also toxic and contributing to the decimation of our planet. But the good thing is that we have a movement. We have a movement that knows better. So our movement is about fighting for space, for liberated territory, for our people to be free and self-determining, to be fighting for land, to be decommodified and taken off the speculative market. It's extremely important to us to be in solidarity with Indigenous comrades, to rematriate the land and get back to all of our Indigenous legacies of land-based knowledge, understanding that land is a relative and a source of healing and resistance. So we have a member, Soulfire Farm, shout out to them. They're in upstate New York. And so there's a quote from Leah Penniman that talks about, in 2006, when they first started their work, their topsoil was just a few inches deep with hard pan clay underneath and severely eroded. Since then, their soils have more than tripled in depth. They've seen pollinators coming back, biodiversity to the land, right? And so I'm lifting that up as an example, small example, but tremendous, because if we pay attention to get back to a regenerative relationship to the land, what does that mean in terms of the healing that needs to happen, with the soils, but also with our communities? So, land, including also the bodies of waters that are also colonized, but land is the first site of some of the most heinous violence that continues to be perpetuated against the earth, but also against us. So, it's also one of, if not the most important sites of our liberation. And so land for us, again, it's a means to understand how to truly be free. And so through our work, which I'm about to talk about in 2 seconds, we have been working on practicing governance with each other, upholding Black feminist, anti-capitalist, and abolitionist principles, ensuring all of our folks, including queer, trans, disabled, formerly incarcerated, all of our folks have the means to be nourished, to be safe, to be whole, and in our full dignity. So the last part here is Black land and power. Thank you, Shelley. We are working just in the spirit of the legacy of the new communities that Kelly lifted up. Thank you, and Allison. It's the first legal formation, and thank you, Mark, for lifting up the fact that there are other formations of land-based work that we are drawing on. And so the Black Land and Power Coalition, which is sponsored by the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, it's a network of Black land stewards. So shout out to Mama Muja Shakur, who I see is in the audience, of Nature's Garden for Victor and Peace in Alabama. We are working on building a network of land stewards, community land trusts and farms, working towards ultimately land reform strategies through a 3-pronged strategy. One is building a strong network of Black-led community land trusts and sustainable land stewards. The second is to fund. We launched a fund which supports our ecosystem, but also expanding the ecosystem. At the height, Black land stewardship was about 5 million acres. I'm saying stewardship instead of ownership, because we don't agree with owning and private ownership of land. So our goal is a reclamation around, Black people's stewardship, sustainable stewardship to the land. And the third layer of that fund is to defend against the violence that happened before, but continues to happen. It didn't stop. The third strategy of ours is most important, which is to fight. So it's build, fund, fight. Our goal is to fight, organize, invest in leadership towards what international communities all over the world are working towards, which is land reform. Last couple of things, we're working on policy with the Movement for Black Lives. We're on the leadership team there. I just want to reiterate the defunding police is a viable and necessary call that we need allies to stand in solidarity with us around. So we see our aims as divesting from the harm and investing in life and care. And so that's what this land work is about. There's a Black Farmers Justice Act that's coming up. I was going to tell you all about it, but I think I'm running short on time. And then I have some thoughts around how we need to dig into abolition and thinking about all the forms of slavery need to end in this country, right? So the 13th Amendment tells us that the prison industrial complex continues to perpetuate the enslavement of African people, brown people, indigenous people in this country. And that needs to be eradicated. But we also need to understand abolition calls us to think about the root causes and to imagine something much more deserving for our communities. And so I invite us to extend that imagination to the prison industrial complex and beyond, but also extend it to the industrial agricultural complex, right? And think about how we can invest in building new systems that our communities absolutely deserve. I'm going to pause there. I think I'm going to kick it over to Dawn and maybe say a couple of words in a second afterwards about Rowan White's work. So Dawn Phillips.
Thank you so much, Dara. I always say, what's better than 1D? Two Ds. It's a 2D kind of day. So much appreciation to all the folks who did the work of organizing the call. Want to shout out the NFG tech team who's holding us down this morning, and appreciation always for the opportunity to have such a meaningful partnership with NFG. It's a long, fruitful, and powerful one, and I just want to appreciate everybody who's made that possible. So following in Dara's footsteps, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Dawn Phillips, and I'm the director of the Rights to the City Alliance. For anyone who is hoping to hear a lot more about Rights to the City this morning, I'm going to be talking more about our work, our framework, our vision, our values, and our strategy. To some extent, then getting really, really deep in the nitty gritty, you know, like where our groups are, how many, all that kind of stuff. If you're interested in any of that, please feel free to let me know, and I'm happy to send you that information. But for today, I really want to talk about the ideas and really kind of reinforce, I think, more than anything, so much of what Dara has already started to put out. So I'm an immigrant to this country. Queer immigrant. I was born and raised in Singapore, where we were a colony of the so-called British Empire for about 170 years. And before that, the Dutch, and then in some places where I'm from, before that, the Portuguese. So along the lines of what Dara shared, for me, this work is rooted in a history of several hundred years of colonial oppression, both in my home country and my home region, as well as the context that myself and other of the Black, Indigenous, and folks of color work with here in this country. And I think why we are talking about land today is because our understanding is that land is fundamental to any vision, any agenda, and any reality of self-determination that is possible, right? So there really is not a way to discuss the ability of a community, of a people, of a nation to be sovereign, to be able, as Dara said, not just to manage, but to steward kind of the resources, the life-giving, life-sustaining resources that are needed without land at the center of that, right? So the starting point today is really that land is central, not just to survival, but to self-determination for all peoples, especially peoples who are living still with that history of imperialism, of colonialism, and of genocide. So I wanted to just start by saying that, you know, land is a highly contested and highly valuable commodity in the capitalist system. It's not just our peoples who need and value land. There is a form of value that capitalism has placed in land and in housing today. And what that means is that currently 60% of all the world's assets, all in the whole world, or the equivalent of $217 trillion, is located in real estate and real estate speculation. And of that $217 trillion, 74% 74% of that is in housing specifically, right? And pretty much all of us on this call are aware that that is in stark contrast and contradiction to the gentrification, to the displacement, to the systemic dislocations, as Dara was naming, that many communities have had of the ability to safely, healthily, and sustainably stay in place, right, in their homes, in their communities of choice, et cetera. And we know that while we unite with Dara that the vision is not per se about individual home ownership. Individual home ownership is a good indication of this dislocation, because at the same time where we see investors like Blackstone, private capital investors like Blackstone buying up 30% of over 37% of all home sales, where we know that home ownership for the vast majority of communities of color is at its all-time historic low, right? It's never been lower in the history of this country than it is at this present moment. And why is this the case? This is the case because of multiple decades of an aggressive policy and political framework of neoliberalism that is deep both in this country but globally as well. And part of the reason why I wanted to name that is because this neoliberal agenda stands aside and outside to some extent of who is in the White House, who's in Congress, who is in the Senate, right? Neoliberalism is a political and ideological framework that has been actively pursued as aggressively by Democrats as by Republicans, right? And I'm raising this today because I think many of us are kind of celebrating, and rightly so, celebrating the defeat of Trump and preparing for an incoming Biden-Harris administration. But the reality is we cannot forget that we are facing no less significant of a threat of reimposition of neoliberalism in a Biden-Harris administration as we were under a Trump administration, right? So I think that there's an important regrounding in this moment to remind ourselves that that while we are seeing a change in administration, we are not likely to see a change in the kind of fundamental political frameworks that have led our communities to be in this place that we are now and today, right? So without getting all in the weeds about neoliberalism, which I think is a framework that most folks on the call are very familiar with, this agenda of privatization, of over-reliance on private capital and the quote-unquote market, the kind of like heavy deregulation, the reduction of the role of government in providing and meeting critical needs for communities has all led to what we know to have caused the foreclosure crisis, this moment of like growing homelessness, the loss of public housing, inadequate production of truly affordable housing nationally, and the growing affordability crisis for renters, right? As well as a model of corporate development that prioritizes profit over community need. So even as we pivot to some extent away from the last 4 years, I apologize for repeating this again, but I feel it's so critical. Like we have to have our eyes wide open, that the dangers remain really real, and that we have to be ready to ensure that there's actually true transformation. So our sense is that renters have a very strategic role to play in this political moment. This housing crisis caused by neoliberalism has also created conditions that position renters in a very strategic way. One, because renters are essentially at the at the center of multitudes of social movements and social struggles, right? Because renters are single moms. Renters are overwhelmingly Black, Indigenous, folks of color. Renters are students. Renters are seniors, right? So we understand that renters actually are, while they share a kind of a role in the economy, they also overlap and intersect with many, many other movements and many, many other struggles. And that we know that the number of renters are growing right now, right? Because of the way in which the housing market and the way in which neoliberalism has affected land and housing organization in this country, we're seeing renters becoming the majority in more and more places, even in less urban areas. We're seeing that there are likely to be about 108 well, actually, right now, there are 108 million tenants living in 43 million rented homes. And that figure is projected to grow another 50 million households over the next 20 years. So we are talking about a lot of people who are kind of deeply invested in changing the system because it's clearly a system that's not working for them, right? So what is it that is at the crux of this idea of transformation? So I'll say a couple of things. So I think in terms of the land and housing liberation work that we are doing, very similar to what Dara put out, we believe firmly and centrally that the leading aspect of transformation has to be the ability to organize hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and ultimately millions of people, right? So for us, the idea that we need and we would love to see through not just the work that we're doing as an organization, but it encapsulates the work that Dara, others are doing, right? Because this is a mass effort by many formations, many of us together, a movement ecosystem, not just individual organizations working together to organize millions of people across the country. The number that we've kind of set for ourselves is 5 million. Because that represents just about 3% of all renters in the country. We want to, as Dara said, see 1 million acres of land put back into community stewardship using the framework that Dara put out, which is not a framework of individual ownership, but a framework of collective stewardship, where communities and peoples come together to decide and determine what is best, not just for their community, Mother Earth, the environment, and their own lives, but all those things together. And we're looking to redistribute hundreds of millions of dollars to support these developments and this type of community stewardship. And so for us, there really is not a way to imagine the transformation of neoliberalism and the real estate sector without imagining the transformation of the nature of the relationships between individuals, communities, peoples, and to some extent, movement organizations and movement formations. Now, we know that because of this history of colonialism, because of the long history where our peoples and our organizations have been systemically divided, pitted against each other, and really kind of encouraged and supported to be against each other, the idea is that we fundamentally have to change the way both we relate to each other, but how we relate to each other in this broader movement ecosystem as well. And so we talk about this idea that only a housing movement that centers indigenous sovereignty, self-determination, feminism, and Black liberation can successfully contend with the twin threats of both the real estate sector and neoliberalism. So on that note, I'm going to end, and I'm going to ask our beautiful tech crew to queue up a short video. This is a video that demonstrates the work that is being done in Minneapolis by our group, one of our groups there called Inquilinex Unidex. And they are doing powerful work that is going to come across clearly, and it's very much an illustration of the ideas and the principles that I'm sharing. So if folks could cue the video, that'll be wonderful.
Estoy extremadamente feliz porque esta victoria significa mucho esfuerzo, mucha dedicación, mucha disciplina de un grupo de personas desconocidas que en un inicio formamos un grupo sin pensar lo que podríamos lograr durante estos tiempo indeterminado.
Let me tell you, I feel like a big relief. Because it's been a really long battle, a really long struggle, but I do know that we have more work to do. I'm excited to continue this journey with my neighbors that we've built this family around.
Creo que firmemente que esto puede trascender mucho más que una cooperativa. Esto es el inicio de, como su nombre lo dice, un cielo sin límite. Significa mucho para nosotros dar un inicio, un motivo para que otras familias se integren a nuestra cooperativa y así mismo poder lograr otras cooperativas más y que nuestro cielo no tenga límites.
My vision is to have all the units filled with people that are in line with the cooperative's values. Not people that want to be there because it's affordable housing, but people that actually want to build and grow as a family and a community. In the near future though, like maybe 5 or 10 years from now, I could see us having a carpooling company. I can see us having a daycare center there. I could see us having classes where we teach each other English, Spanish, even the East African language as well, so that we can all be able to connect with one another and talk with each other. So that's my vision for the cooperative.
Este trabajo no termina con esta victoria. El trabajo comienza desde ahora, porque tenemos que recaudar fondos para poder ayudarnos entre sí. Necesitamos mucha ayuda de la comunidad y tenemos que unirnos más que nunca hoy en día para que podamos seguir transformándonos.
Tenant unions is also a way for us to bridge the gap between the north side and the south side throughout the city, and just let people know that at the end of the day we are all united, we are all going through the same things, but we're coming together.
Este triunfo es importante para que podamos hacer triunfos mucho más fuertes y que podamos ser una comunidad más informada.
Rahina here, we've seen her grow up so far. They give us our strength because we know that like what we're doing is for our kids to have a better future. And so without them, I don't know if I would have been able to continue on with this.
Dale un beso a Chloe. Dale un beso. No, a Chloe. A Chloe.
Rahina,
No.
give me a kiss.
Un beso.
What an inspiring conversation, and also just such a beautiful story of victory and triumph to end this part of our conversation with. So I just want to just again, like if we can just take a collective breath in, collective breath out with all of that wisdom and knowledge that both Dara and Dawn brought to us. So thank you so much. We're going to sort of freestyle this agenda just a little bit and take a short dance break because that was so much wisdom. And then when we return, we're going to have a great benefit of having both our panelists, Dara and Dawn, be in some conversation with each other and ask each other questions. And then we will be going into sort of a broader Q&A that Niall and Allison are gonna help us moderate. So thank you so much. We're gonna have a 3-minute dance break. So it's about the time of this awesome song. So please get up, move your body, and we will see you back here, okay, after this song. Thank you so much, community, for being with us today.
Yeah. I've been flipping through my timeline, trying to get my mind right. My city crying out.
So we hope that you took care of yourself and that you boogied a little bit and that, you know, clean version, not whatever. It's Janelle Monáe. We're testifying today. So now it is our esteemed honor to really go into a dialogue between our panelists, Dara and Dawn, and give some time for them to be in community with each other, because that is just as important and paramount as, you know, the opportunity for all of us as a sector to be in community with frontline leaders. So Dara, the question that you shared really for Dawn, and please correct me if I'm getting the wrong question here, but I believe that you wanted to ask Dawn about what a political North Star is at this moment for us, and where are we driving? Where are you all of us, where are we driving solidarity work towards? And what are the things that we're asking folks to hold the line on? You know, like what are we compromising and what cannot, what is not up for compromising? So if that sounds right, and please, if you want to amend, of course, go ahead and do that. But so yes, Dara and Dawn, take it away.
I'm so excited for this. Yeah, I'm like, yes. And I want to acknowledge that this question actually came out of a conversation I had with Rowan. And if I can just really appeal to folks to really look up Rowan White. She's so brilliant, and she's actually working on a body of work around land and rematriation. And so please look up her work, and also the Indian Collective's Land Back movement. But this question came out of my conversation with her that I really wanted to extend and really dig into Dawn, because we have, you know, so much happening, and I'm listening to you with these exciting goals that we share so much in common around, and just, you know, thinking about, you know, we're having, how many did you say, 5 million people plus, because I think we can do this, Dawn. So 5 million and beyond, right? You know, what are we driving towards? And I have some thoughts too after you share. But
yeah, and Dara, I was actually going to say, I kind of wanted you to tell me what you're thinking of this first. I just got done speaking, so I think we should do it that way. You should tell me what you think, and then I'll add if I have anything else. But yes, please do.
Well, okay, I'll oblige real quick, and then also I want to lift up a couple of words from my interview with Rowan that I thought was pretty cool too. But you know, when I think of, I actually love alliteration, so I thought about this question in some terms using alliteration, right? And so, you know, when I think of what victory looks like for us politically, I think of recovery, reclamation, and repair. There's been deep, deep harm to our communities that continues to happen. And so I think about all of those things in terms of what does it mean to recover? What does it mean to reclaim what's been lost, and including in our future generations? And when I think about, repair, also to lift up, in Cobra and reparations too, that I think is really important, which need to note there are 5 requirements to that. One is the cessation of harm and guarantee of non-repetition. Another is restitution, compensation, satisfaction, and rehabilitation. And so I just want to offer that up as a definition. But I just think about reparations, rematriation with the land, and then towards an abolitionist politic, practice, and pathway towards reparations and rematriation. And so I'd like to see us, drive towards a land reform movement, as I mentioned before, in solidarity with the movement internationally. I was deeply politicized in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, and Namibia, and Mozambique around land, also in Colombia. So I see Katrina's on the call too, so shout out to Katrina Baxter. We did a delegation to Colombia around land. So I can talk more about that in terms of what I'm seeing in terms of maroon communities organizing themselves, using state resources to actually build up their own infrastructures. But I'd love to see that here in terms of some serious repairing of harm and reclamation of our practices back to indigenous ways of being with the earth. So how does that flow with you? What you think?
Yeah, there that's really that really deeply resonates. I think sometimes when we talk about our work, some of us say that we are incidentally housing organizers, and we are fundamentally concerned about transformation. And I think that sometimes when that term or that idea gets put out, the sense is that it's primarily a vision, and it's primarily an aspiration. And I think that what I agree with you is that for us today, even as we are kind of like right in the midst of what is, this severe crisis, we are so clear that if we don't work on the historic traumas, the historic hurts, the historic divisions, the things that capitalism and colonialism have grown up inside all of us, that we are really not, not only are we not going to be able to liberate the land, but we can't liberate ourselves, right? And there's a fundamental relationship, and in the video, you see that, and that's just like one microcosmic example where the video makes it appear, and the story of the folks who did that organizing makes it appear as if the unity, the solidarity, and fundamentally the love was intuitive. Because why? Because they were neighbors, because they lived next door to each other, because they live in the same building, because they live on the same block. And those of us who actually organize know that that's actually not the case. If you're actually like knocking on doors, if you're actually talking to neighbors, more common than not, people don't speak to each other. People do not feel safe engaging each other, right? There's a whole history of that is inside, us from a political, social level to a cellular level, that we have to kind of like work through together, and that the idea, as you were saying, Dara, of like solid, like deep, real solidarity, deep, real interdependence. This is fundamental to the organizing, and I think this is actually where, to me, like I feel so urgent, because it's easy to some extent, or it's easier to some extent, even though it's not, to get people behind the idea that we need to organize and grow land trusts or collective models of stewardship or cooperatives, or to support organizing in some cases. But like the much more challenging idea is to get our partners, and I think this is true of folks in philanthropy, to understand this thing that I hear so much be at the center of your work, and I think is at the center of ours too, is this idea that we have to, that it takes time, it takes intentionality, and it is strategy. It is strategy that is required to produce these new relationships between, within, and across peoples, communities, nations. That is the basis, right, of a just transition. That is the basis of the transformation from extractive to regenerative. That is fundamentally what distinguishes a false solution from a real solution or a people solution. And so, I'm really appreciating, Dara, today, the opportunity to get so deep in this idea, because I think oftentimes these conversations stay at the level of like, here's the campaign, here's the project, here's the effort to decommodify or to collectivize this stewardship model. But like, how can we get folks who are on this call, and all of us, so invested in the idea that this work that is harder to explain, harder to quantify, and in some cases hard to describe, and then takes so long, so much patience, so much love, and so much attention, that is the heart of where our attention, our resourcing, and our commitment must be if we're going to see all these other outcomes also become possible.
Absolutely. Y'all, Dawn for president, what y'all say? That's what I say.
Well, listen, for one, I don't know. Do we even think that's something that we need?
Well, there's that.
Long term? I mean, you know what I mean?
Question for sure. But I was going to add one more thing. Yeah, absolutely. Everything to what you said. And the reality is we didn't get in these conditions overnight, right? So we are addressing generations of trauma, generations of colonialism, generations of, oppression. And so absolutely what you said in terms of all of the work it entails, all the love it entails, all the relationships it entails, all the systems and infrastructure it entails to hold our relationships. And so absolutely to that. But just to add on to what you said, which is generations is what we're dealing with. I saw a note from Farhan. Shout out to you, Farhan, long time, about urban and rural. And I think that's a really dope question, because I love, this conversation, because that's what's kind of underneath. Some of what's underneath our conversation. You all do a lot of work in urban settings. We do urban and rural. Many of our members are based in rural communities. And that's what's interesting about the community land trust work too. It actually started out of rural communities, but to see it being applied in urban settings too, right? And particularly through many of your members and work too. So maybe if there's something that you can speak to around, how you see the community land trust work and oh, sorry, I'm stepping on Allison's toe.
There are no toes. You're not stepping on no toes.
Yeah, I thought he was trying to bring his question into the conversation, but I thought it was spot on. And I'm glad he named it, because this is something very specific that I think we're all working on, which is what are the solutions and how are we thinking about urban, peri-urban, and rural, communities and all of this. So.
Yes, and I did not mean to interrupt that flow, Dar. We're gonna flow right into that, and I just wanted to transition us now, because those questions that Farhan is posing, and also any other questions that you all may have, please place in the chat. And we're gonna transition now to take this like really deep dive and connection that Dawn and Dara have facilitated for us. And we're going to carry that even deeper to bring everyone's voice into the space. So Niall and Allison are now going to facilitate the next part, which is questions from you all, and also questions that they have for us. Thank you, Dara.
I don't even want to take myself off mute because I never want to speak after Dara and Dawn. So I was not trying to get in there, but we're coming to a close. I feel like this has been such a rich conversation, but one of the things Kelly and I, and we're ripping off of Vinny, who did this recently. For anyone who saw Vinny facilitate the Katali Foundation call, that was like amazing and gave us so much life. One thing that she did was, we're always, y'all come and share your knowledge and wisdom and brilliance with us, and then we get to ask you questions. But we took a page out of Vinny's book and said, why don't we flip the script and actually have y'all ask each other questions? And then we want to know what questions you have for us as a funding community and start there. And if we have time, we only have a few moments left. I know you already sort of started to get into Farhan's amazing question. We'll see if we have time for others, but if you have questions for Dara and Dawn, please put them in the chat, and we'll be happy to follow up afterwards. But Dawn, I know you had a 17-part juicy question, as per usual for all of us. So I'll try to just lift up, I think, the highlights, but I'll need you to step in if I mess it up. And I think, Niall, you're gonna help by seeing who wants to grab the mic and maybe step in, or if you have a response, put it in the chat. Niall, anything to add there for how?
No, this has been an amazing call. I think I want to hear what Dawn and others have to say about it. I like questions to funders, so let's build on that.
Cool. Okay, let me try to do it. Let me try to do Dawn's 17-part question justice. All right, I love you, Dawn. All right, Dawn's question for us is sort of while we recognize the importance of Trump's removal from the White House, yes, we have our eyes wide open to the challenges of the next period. Despite an incoming Biden administration, it will take significant work to ensure the next 4 years of federal action serves and not further harms Indigenous, Black, and other working class communities of color. So Dawn's question to us is a couple part, but what can philanthropy do to ensure that our sector is deeply aligned and coordinated with movement forces to ensure that we can push the most meaningful federal level interventions possible? So what are we going to do to be in alignment with Dara and Dawn and other frontline communities? And then I think the other piece to hold is to ensure that our defeat of Trump does not lull us into thinking that the hardest work is behind us. What lessons can we as funders and philanthropy lift up from our engagement with 8 years of Obama and that administration? What should we do differently? What should we keep doing the same? So kind of trying to build and bring forth some of those lessons. And Niall, I haven't been paying attention to chat. Is anyone wanting to unmute?
No one's ready for that, but I do think if they are, I really encourage the conversation. I do think this is a part 2 conversation. I think it's an ongoing conversation that a lot of folks are having. So I'm open to see if anybody on the call or internally in your institutions are talking about this, and if you want to respond to Dawn's question.
Yeah, this is Farhan. I'm happy to speak to that, at least from NFG's perspective. So for folks who don't know me, my name is Farhan McLurkin, and I'm the Vice President of Programs here at Neighborhood Funders Group. And a couple of thoughts, because through the course of the election and on in the past week, we've been in conversation with funders around the country of various stripes about sort of this very question. And I have a couple of thoughts on it. Is the first in the most 10,000 foot way, but also in the most sort of deeply personal and political way. I actually want to encourage us to recognize and ask ourselves the question of, or embrace the fact that we are, or at least can be, part of this movement too. Folks are fighting. When I saw the video, and thanks, so happy to see both D's. I have had a relationship with that work. And I just know it's so incredible. And I was really struck by, in the video, my favorite part, or the part that kind of touched me the most, was when kind of the second woman spoke, she kind of gave this breath, this and this relief. And she said, you know, it's been something like this, been a long time coming. It's been a long fight. And what I thought, and then later in the video, they said, oh, this has been 2 years. And I know in some senses in our funding cycles, we're like 2 years, that's not a lot. But when you're on the front lines every day, you know, putting yourself out there to make change in your community, you know, every day against folks that have power over your life, you know, that feels like an eternity. Like, just think about, for, you know, we've heard a lot about the anxiety and the stress of this election. Think how long just the last few weeks have felt for folks, and now multiply that by it being in your house, and it being someone who like you may live right next to, and someone who like can determine a lot about your family. So that's the first thing. And then just in terms of what we've been hearing, you know, I think our call to action is pretty clear. It's first that we need to continue to invest in marginalized communities to build power, right? So we need to invest in low-income communities, workers, Black, Indigenous people of color, LGBTQIA, gender nonconforming, you know, women, immigrants, rural communities. Like, all of these folks have the keys to what we need in our new system. And, you know, I know there's been a big kind of gasp of relief, but these systems weren't built overnight, and no administration is going to change them. And many of these systems have entrenched. So that's so there's a lot more. I would just say, for folks who are interested, there's a lot of information that we've been compiling on calls to action in philanthropy, and I can share a link with that on our website. But just again, I think about yourself and think about your role you want to play in history in terms of this movement. How can you be part of it? And how can you use your platform, your privilege, and your power to help make the world a better place? Thanks so much, y'all, for this amazing program.
Yes,
Yeah, thanks. That's you dropped the mic on that one, and it's really tight and complete, and been having great conversations about this. Kelly, Allison, any closing thoughts as we kind of slow down and wrap it up?
Well, I just want to say one thing, because then I'm going to pass it to Kelly. I do want to say quickly as we close, just if there are resources that we want to share with each other, like spaces where, like in the funding community, NFG is a big political home and a community of practice for so many of us. And Farhan and Niall, thank you for lifting all of that up. So I think, you know, if there are specifics, thank you, Farhan. I see you sharing that. If there's anything else folks want to share where they're learning and organizing with other funders to respond to what it is Dar and Dawn have put forward today, let's share that with each other. Let's keep going. Let's keep learning together and organizing together. So, and then we will save this chat and we will share those resources back out with folks so that we know kind of what our next steps are. And thank you for those calls to action. So back to Kelly.
And only to say thank you all. Like, this gives me such fire and energy, and just a reassurance with all that is going on, that we do in fact have a beloved community, because we're building it right now. And your intentionality of being here and sharing this time and space with us is love in action, right? Which is really basically what justice is all about. So please, we're going to share all the links in the chat. I know that there was an event that is coming up on Thursday, democratizing housing. So please register for any of the events. Check the National Black Food and Justice Alliance website, because they're also hosting some amazing events and conversations as well. And please, let's not forget to check out the links with Rowan's work. And I just want to lift up that Rowan is also a Castanea Fellow, so which is also an amazing program. So whatever funder community you're a part of, we thank you for joining this, and please take this and share it with the world. And don't forget, you can always text Allison and I, because, you know, we live for this stuff. And we just want to give a shout out to our director, Helen Chin, because without her leadership, like, we totally wouldn't be here, and our teammate, Aaliyah Davis. So thank you, everyone. And may you have a blessed rest of your day. Thank you.
I'm walking and talking with my mind.